Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you feel fine.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, hello.
Bună ziua! Ciao.
Yeah. We'll wait another couple of minutes for more people to join, and then we'll start today's class.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start because anyway, it's this session it's recorded, so everyone who wants to see it afterward can do that. The today topic it's about light and contrast, and of course the term contrast it's used in various moments when we talk about the overall contrast, or we talk about lighting contrast, and we talk about tonal contrast, which is a black and white contrast, or color contrast, the chromatic contrast. So it has a full range of meanings when we talk about contrast. And because the today topic it's about light and lighting contrast, and of course related with the dynamic range, I will explain more in depth what it was about on the video, which I hope you've seen it. So first of all, we have to emphasize the differences between the two versions of light quality, which are hard light and soft light. So when we talk about a hard light, we of course imagine the sunlight on a sunny day and no clouds on the sky. So that's that kind of quality I'm talking about when I'm referring to hard light, which is a kind of harsh, but in a way, when we try to emphasize some compositional meanings, the hard light is the more appropriate way of doing that. And I will explain later about this. On on the regular basis, when we talk about hard light versus soft light, we are talking about how the light is produced. So the definition of it, it's the hard light is produced by a single pointed source, which means the shadows are very defined. Single sources point means a very thin lighting source, even if it's the sun is not a very pointed one, because the sun in reality it's very much bigger than the earth, but being that far away, well, we can do that and saying it's producing a very harsh light, or with very defined shadows, as you of course you noticed on a sunny day. On the other way, the soft light, the definition of a soft light, it's the light which is not, of course, a pointed source light. It's a very, as a surface, it's a wide or a broad source light, like a softbox, or a source which is bounced from a whiteboard, or there are many versions of producing it. Also, a very important meaning or relations between soft light and the shadows being produced on the background is the distance from the source itself, and the element and the compositional part which is being lit by the source. What I mean about that, it's I will show you something in a moment. I'm talking about the physical distance between the source itself and right away. I will show you as a definition, or as a graph or schematical way, talking about single source, single point source and the soft lighting source, which are the differences, and then what what I have in mind when I'm saying that about there is also another factor who have to be taken in discussion is the distance between the source itself and the okay, right here. I just found it. Sometimes very hard to well. I have too many windows open on my, and I missed the one with the conference. Anyway, so this is the main difference between soft source and the one which is very harsh or let's say defined. Like we talk about, this is the first source, the soft source, which has a sort like a, let's say, square or a rectangular surface, and it's emitting lighting, which is lighting an object, and the shadow on the background is of course a very soft shadow. When you have a pointed light source, the shadow is very defined on the background. Also, the distance between the object and the background, of course, also defines the gradient of the shadow, which is produced on this background. So even if the source is as well very soft, the distance between the light itself and the object and the background can define this shadow gradient on the background. So sometimes it's not enough to have, let's say, I will show you some examples here about very defined and very hard light situation, some mixed example, and one which is very soft. The differences between those three positions, let's say, or qualities, is not the distance from the source to the model, it's just the surface of the light itself. So here is just a light, which is a tungsten light. It's a 1K projector, which makes this, it's a Fresnel lens projector, which project this kind of shadows and contrast, and then a little more soften the source will do this middle version, and then a very soft box situation will produce this third example. So as a rule, when we use diffusion systems, the diffusion itself will widen up the will make the light broaden up the light flux. I mean, the light itself is not going to be very directionally through the windows. Let's say this is, let's say, a window, and it's going to be pretty wide projected through it. As in differences, when we put diffusion and soft diffusion on the window, this effect of broaden up the flux, it's the light flux, it's very, very different, and it's wider than in reality. Anyway, that's a very specific discussion, and it's not about how we think and choose to shoot or photograph some actions, or just portraits in in interior daylight, or how to approach this kind of situations with mixed light as a quality. So something in between hard and soft, and how the atmosphere of the scene will be influenced by this approach. Now I'm going to show you a video which was shot in our studio, and and I will explain which is the difference between those two. So on the first, let me just start it again. On the first video, which I'm going to present now, we use a kind of soft light situation. Sure why it doesn't want to go up a bit. That means the light source outside the window is a very soft one, and what it's as a light scheme here is shown differently in as the atmosphere. So we have, that's a studio lighting here, as I told you before. So we have 4 different light sources here, actually 5, as I remember. So it's one which is lighting the whole window, and then there's a light effect, which is very straight on this kind of cabinet here and chair. And there's another one inside the room, and it's a fill light on the character itself. So as you can see it here, when the character on the left is sitting, is having a very defined backlight, and the whole scene looks or feels very contrasty as a feeling. When we reduce the first light, and we see that again here. So this is with it, and now it's on. It's off, sorry. So on, off. The feeling is totally different because we miss that lighting accent, which brings more three-dimensionality to the scene. Either if the position of the camera and the lens was a very wide lens, will emphasize good enough the whole environment here. So this is without that light. Next one, there are 2 lights which are turn off inside. The first one is let's say the sky light, and you can see it here through the curtain. There's a different contrast, and this is the light I told you about. We use it from interior to light the atmosphere here. So this is just one light, actually 2 lights. So it's just the key light and the fill light. The problem is the feeling which we had it before on this kind of environment is totally different than this one here, or this one here. Yeah, because first of all, the contrast is totally different on the 2 situations, and the contrast itself is defining the time of the day, or the feeling of the time of the day we expect to see it in the room. So getting back to the first example and explanation, this is a situation made in studio. It's not a real location, and because on the real location we have the windows, and the windows itself can produce parts or something from the light effect we want to use in that interior. So here we don't have any lights. We just use all the lights we imagine or we wish to use for this light effect, and therefore we trying to reproduce the feeling which in an interior daylight we expected to have it. So again, this is how the whole thing again started here. Look at the light effect on his face and on this cupboard here. That's the first one which turns off here. That's the first feeling, and the differences is very big, because if you see how it is with it and how it is without it, there's a big differences on the feeling. Again, we still have several more lights to light this scene, and as I told you, we have 3 lights outside the window and 2 lights inside this room. One which is mostly making an effect, supplementary effect from the window, and there's a fill light which is coming from the camera left here. So now we're going to see it again, how those lights are turned off. So first it's the skylight. If you notice here, if you look at the curtain here, yeah, that's the skylight turn off, and now the interior light is turned off. And this is the lighting scheme with just 2 lights. One, let's say the base of the lighting effect, which is the key light, and the fill light, which is coming from the left here. But the contrast overall is too big for, let's say, underlining an atmosphere which it might be credible to be a daylight interior in this room. So regarding the differences between how it was and how it is now, we just look at these different situations. Let's say, let's have the guy sitting, this one and this one, which of course they are very, very different. As first, the overall contrast and the feeling of having a light effect which is credible for an interior daylight scene. Do you have any questions about this? Not yet. I will show you now the next one, which is, I think, very interesting as well, because it shows different kind of light effect, which is not soft at all. So the first example was a very soft light effect, or wait a second. Right. So the difference is because before between what was and what is now, it's the quality of the light. This is a different quality because, as you can see it here, we feel the shadows of the curtain projected on the walls and on the floor. And before, we didn't have this kind of very hard light, let's say an interior hard light situation. And because of that, we didn't need any adding more light effects in this interior. We just had the skylight and the interior light here being turned on. So we have less than 6 lights we had it involved before. Now we have just 4 lights. And also the feeling and the contrast in this scene, it's of course totally different than the one before, because I'm not talking about only about the contrast. I'm also talking about the overall contrast and the light direction and the contrast within the whole scene. So, of course, those kind of situations are very hard to imagine when we try to make ourselves one portrait or just one atmosphere photographs inside our room or a studio. But sometimes we have to think about, or at least have in mind, how many lights we need to involve to make an atmosphere similar with what we expected to see in the room, let's say like the one I'm sitting here during daytime or a nighttime moment. So what we have here, of course, it's what the natural sunlight is doing in the room. But as an example, if I'm changing the contrast in this situation, the room will gonna look totally different. Yeah. Because actually the light effect, which is seen in the background, is the one who gives the reality and the feeling of how the let's say the atmosphere in this room it's made. Yeah. I'll turn this back on. At least you can see me. So that's also a matter of the contrast and how the light value as a direction and intensity, quality, and color will interfere with our feelings and how our knowledge of how different kind of situation or lighting schemes will emphasize different moods. So as a further discussion on contrast and lighting contrast, of course, some of those important factors are influenced by the camera dynamic range. The dynamic range, it's as a definition, it's differences between the darkest black and the whitest white, and it's expressed in t-stops. So usually, very typical camera, even a smartphone, can have a very wide dynamic range because of the algorithms which the camera or the smartphone can have it and process the picture we capture. So even if we talk about photographs or video tab, on both situations, the processing algorithms are very important because from the sensor, the information is processed by these algorithms. And after that, we can see how much of the dynamic range from the sensor it's kept in the final format, or how much of this is lost or just too compressed to not occupy too much of the space on the memory card or on the phone, whatever the smartphone memory. Anyway, getting to to the light and contrast back to portrait lighting and this kind of how we can emphasize some compositional elements in our photograph. Sometimes just a lighting accent can make this difference, as I showed you in that video before. So because of that light effect, even if the general mood was made only from a soft light, which was the light we had it on outside the window. I will show you that again. Mhm. So as a basic rule, as I just mentioned, a soft light, it's a light which it has a big surface, big emitting surface for doing this atmosphere. So outside this window here, as I already told you, it was of course a very big light with a diffusion frame in front of it, which was very big, like 120 by 120 meters, so a square. So that's why the shadows we're seeing inside here, they're not very defined, except that one here, which is a light effect we added just to give that separate feeling of texture. So when this light is turned off, you can see the feeling is totally different, because we look at the shadows here and shadows on this face, and we kind of feel a very abrupt, a very huge difference between what it is now and what is going to be next one here. So the overall contrast, because that was the discussion I always want to explain now. The overall contrast doesn't change that much. It's changing only in highlights. Where are the highlights? Where I'm talking about, they're here in this curtain here. Yeah, but having in mind this picture, I will tell you this this video was shot with a mirrorless camera, a Sony, the one which is a APS-C sensor. But even with this very, let's say, consumer camera, because it's not even a prosumer camera, it's a very cheap camera, we can have a full range of contrasts and highlights and shadows. So here, the only difference is, as an overall contrast in this picture, is just this effect here on the curtain, which when we turn off the light, disappears. And also disappears the effect on his face and on the cupboard in the background. The overall contrast, as I told you before, the feeling of the overall contrast is is changing because of the level of the whitest white and the blackest, the darkest black. The darkest black level stays the same. If you look at somewhere here on the left, or somewhere behind this drawer here. But when we look at the highlights, we can easily see the differences in the reflex here and in the real time, in the real life on the window. So also when we change this kind of different lights which we involved in this all color scheme, or means lighting scheme, of course the feeling it's we're not anymore in the room, which is a daylight atmosphere. We're just in a room, it does look like in late afternoon or even night. Yeah. The only feeling which is wrong, it's about this curtain, which shouldn't be lit like that in a nighttime situation. But otherwise, the contrast, we feel it here, and the values, we discuss it. They're very close to a night scene, comparing with the beginning, which is of course very, very different. Yeah, as a contrast, direction, lighting, contrast, and so on and so forth. So that was a lighting scheme when we have the key light, kind of a soft light, even if it was a strong one, and all the rest lights involved there, different kind of direction and texture and qualities. And now if we look at the other video, we already saw it, but I'll show that again. We can see how the daylight feeling, it's not that good because of the contrast we feel it here. The contrast is also big because of the different quality of the key light. The key light, the light we have it, we keep it outside the window. Now it's a very hard light. Yeah, you can feel the curtain shadows here on the wall and on the floor, which doesn't happen before because this, the light was very soft light. And now let's look at the overall contrast, which also is going to be influenced by the different intensity of the lights which we have it inside. One of those, it's, you'll see again, this is the outside light, which tries to duplicate the skylight. And this is the inside light, which tries to brings a bit higher the darkest levels of black, and not making it like it's a nighttime scene. So as an overall feeling, of course, the differences between this kind of scene and the other one, it's a totally different feeling because of the involvement of the lights we use it in in both situations. Now, I told you about the quality of light, which is a very important aspect of how we imagine and how we replicate one of the atmosphere or the feelings we want to make it in the composition, even if it's a close shot of a character or just an atmosphere shot inside a room or a studio. Sometimes we're trying to add a little more depth in the composition by involving kind of overlapping elements in the composition, and give that compositional depth with different levels of elements in the composition. Like we have a foreground and midground. In the midground can be the action of the composition, and then the foreground and the background and the composition. Wait a second, sorry. Okay. So that means when we overlap this kind of elements, we also need to pay attention of the levels of the lighting or intensity we engage in these kind of situations, because if some of the parts of the elements that are brighter than the subject's intensity, then the subject will be diminished as importance in the composition we talk about. Okay. As a main application of this contrast regarding the lighting contrast, of course, every time we have at least two lights involved in this lighting scheme, which is the key light and the fill light. The position of the key lights and the fill light, of course, it's very much dependent on what we want to shoot and what's the atmosphere or the lighting position we want to make for that subject. Let's say we have to, or we want to shoot a portrait, and we want to involve some soft lights in this scheme, or we want to involve a mixed kind of lights, which can be a mixed light between soft and hard light. As I already showed you, the hard lights are very important to emphasize the differences, or how the contrast and the local contrast will be shown in this kind of situation or atmosphere. Either if you want to make a low key or a high key atmosphere, that means in that mood we imagine the differences between the key light and the fill light can be bigger than in reality, just to emphasize the differences in the lighting scheme. As I showed you before in that video, when we changed it, this kind of percentage between, or intensity percentage between the key light and the fill light, the overall contrast also changes as well, because the ambient light, which sometimes can be defined like an overall soft light, which soften up the contrast, that ambient light can be very useful when we want to make a daylight interior atmosphere in a studio, and this atmosphere light emulates what a DOP or a photographer call the bounce light inside the room. So as you can see it here in my room, there's a lot of bounce light in the room because of the lights which are involved in the lighting scheme. I will turn down the light again. So if I'm looking that way and seeing the light effect on my walls, of course the main direction and the meaning of the whole lighting scheme is not based on the character, on myself. So for that thing, I need to add some extra lights, and this extra light, it's also has to be keeping the same direction like the main lights we have it here, or we can add some extra light which not necessarily can come from the same position. And I will give you an example now. I will turn on the light. I already turned it on. And I will show you how the interior feeling is going to be different just by adding another light or two lights in this lighting scheme. I'll show you right away. So the intensity and the quality of these lights. So the intensity is not that big. I will turn it to 100% now. The color temperature is very warm. So if I'm going close to that outside temperature, you can feel it now. The feeling is different, yes. If I'm also changing the or adding another light, which can be the desk light, which I have it here, of course, the color temperature between all those, they're very different. So either I can make it something in between from the light I have it here and change the feeling of the inside the temperature room by changing the balance in between it. So now the color temperature is 3200 on that light, which I can turn it off now. And of course, adjusting those differences, the camera here, which is not a very spectacular one, will adjust the contrast range and the feeling of the things which is seen here in the room. So as a main norm when we changing this feeling, first we have to look to the interior atmosphere. We have to replicate it, which is, I will get out to the room, is that light effect. We can see it here inside, yeah, and it's done by the exterior light bouncing off the buildings in front of my window. Then if I want to add some extra light, even if it's just from the same direction as the window, I can change the feeling of that atmosphere, inside atmosphere, just by raising the this light effect I'm having in here. Also, by changing that position of the light, we'll also do this different things and feelings in the room, because just bringing too much of the contrast on the foreground or reducing it will change the mood of the room, you see. So now I'm a very dark character inside that this very nice lit room. I didn't put the light inside, it's just from the god, he just light it. But I'm just adding this one here, which by increasing it, I'm changing the whole atmosphere in the room. It's not about the background, it's about me. And it looks like it's a very different room than the one before. And of course, the character says a different story about this environment. Ding, ding. I can also bring this light again in the discussion, but if I'm changing this contrast between the light I'm just turning on here and the background, this light, which seems very high intensity when this light is turned off, it doesn't look as well when I'm turning on this one. Of course, the color temperature of the lights involved here, they're also very important, because what we're seeing coming from the window, it's daylight, 5600 kelvins. What we have in here inside, I just changed the temperature of this light here. It's LED light. It's 3200, like the bulb I'm using it in this light desk light I'm using it here. So just changing the intensity and the ratio between key light, which is of course the strongest light here, and the fill light, it gives a different feeling inside this room. It's funny, isn't it? Okay, 10 minutes break, and see you in 10 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Oops, sorry, I forgot my glasses. 30 seconds. Okay. Now, getting back on contrast and how we judge the contrast, lighting ratio, and then the contrast of the scene. As I showed in that video, the intensity values of those lights which have been involved in that scheme defines the contrast ratio, the lighting ratio, and the contrast, the overall contrast in the scene. So sometimes we just need to show a very low contrast, and I will get back to that. The quality of the light, of course, says something about how some things in the composition that are underlined, and by just changing the structure of the light source, we can define or redefine the space we're lighting. And in this example here, I just changed the way of lighting the model by just reducing the surface which the light is lighting, let's say it. And you can feel the differences between the first example here, the second, third, and the fourth. And the differences is just how the range of the light itself, how the surface of that effect, it's covering the face, and the elements of this inside is seen are judged by the lighting ratio and the surface which are involved in this situation. I also showed you last time, I think, this one I didn't show you, but I'll show you again soon. Let me just get to that. I had this example here with how the contrast and the lighting contrast in the room can be underlined by adding some more lights in the lighting scheme. So this top left picture was taken without any additional lights on our model face. On the second right, we have some ambient light added. And on the third example here, we have light effect on his chin and neck and chest. And the differences between those three are just supplementing the lights which the light itself can produce it in this scene by two different lights from the similar direction with the light we see in frame. So as a rule, when we have a very small light in the frame, and we want to supplement that light with some extra lights. And this intensity of the light is not enough for us to make a picture. Then we need to supplement it with 2 or 3 lights, as you already showed you in that video, just to bring that feeling of direction, intensity, quality, and color. So those 4 factors, I just repeated now, are very important on how the space we shoot on or photograph on, it's saying something about the atmosphere we want to explain or want to make it. So if you want a low-key atmosphere or a high-key, of course, the surfaces and the elements in the scene, there has to be very in different ranges of contrast and densities, because a low key, it's a very dark and moody atmosphere, comparing with a high key, which is very bright and with low contrast values between key light and fill light. Of course, the direction and the intensity of the lights we expect to use in a composition are very important, because the quality, I mean, hard or soft light, and the direction is very it's feel totally different when we make a single light source or multiple light source. I will explain you what's the relevance of the proximity or the intensity. As I told you before, we have a single source here, which is the, let me change the laptop position. So we're in this room where we feel the exterior light, and we add a little more light here, just for the sake of how the character it's seen in this scene, in this interior. The proximity from the light source and the intensity, of course, it's having different meanings. When the intensity of this light source, which I'm using here, it's very much overall the atmosphere we have it in the room, like that. So the atmosphere we already have it without it, it's destroyed by this intensity, which of course it's too much for this interior atmosphere, which means sometimes the intensity and the direction of the lights we involve in this light scene are very important, because if the intensity is totally different and it's extremely high comparing with the lights which already are involved in the scene, that means the whole atmosphere and the meaning of the lighting, it's changed. So now, when we get close to, wait a second, it's not that easy. I will get back soon. Okay. So this is the light I told you about, as a softbox kind of lighting. So getting back to the what we choose to make in this room, avoiding the light itself from the frame, we can make the, let's say, the the feeling of interior light, and this light here, which is an added light, makes the atmosphere looks real. Yeah, if I'm changing this intensity and the quality of it, it's of course depending on how close from the source I am here. Changing the intensity, because it's again a soft light, and you can see it in my lenses, the source itself. It changes the atmosphere of the room. Yeah, you can feel the differences between what it's relevant on this intensity, which is, this is 100. It's very intense. It's not even 100. Anyway, I'll reduce it. I'm too close to the light, that's why. And relation with the background. Yeah. If I wanted to change the relevance of the color of the light, I can adjusting it to be a little warmer than the background. It does look very different because the ambient light inside this room, it's daylight, and it's coming through the window from outside. Nice and sunny. So I can't really change that feeling. I'm just I can make it a little something in between. This light proposed for this close-up can be not that cold like outside, 5600, like would be like that, but something in between 32 and 56, which is 4300. So sometimes this level of color temperature is choose to do a better transition between what it's seen outside or what it's seen coming from the window inside this room, and the color temperature of the light from outside. So let me just turn it off. Okay. In that video, which I hope you've seen it, I explained it very in depth the differences between softness and direction, and also the intensity and this contrast ratio between key light and fill light. Of course, in the lighting scheme for a portrait, we can have more than 2 lights involved, and also the value and the lighting contrast and the lighting ratio between the key light and the fill light will also define how that picture is going to look, and how the environment is going to be shown in the composition. There are, of course, a lot of approaches and styles for a TV series, cinema, documentary, photography, and so on and so forth, because every medium I just mentioned here has, let's say, different approaches on how the environment and the feeling of what is being shot there is going to be shown on a TV, on a cinema screen, on a laptop, or whatever we need to use for screening the examples I've told you, a TV series, a cinema, a movie or a documentary, beside printed photography or screen photographies on displays, either if they're televisions or LED screens, exterior LED screens, and different kinds of TVs or smart TVs, whatever. Again, getting back to what we expected to show when we do a ratio which is a very even one between fill and key light, we also can change the filling by simply changing the light position or the camera position. So if we want to emphasize the three-dimensionality of the composition or the portrait features like eyes, cheeks, nose, chin, whatever, we have to approach a different kind of lighting situation for each model we have. And of course, in film history and photography history, we have a lot of moments when different models like famous actresses and actors has been photographed or shot with very extreme lighting effects, like in very famous movies like, I don't know, Apocalypse Now, or The Man Who Wasn't There, or there's a lot of movie where the lighting is very extreme, or the mood of the lights, it's in a low key or a high contrast, and not something like a normal key or very usual way of showing the environment we're shoot on. That's why the character and the elements we want to highlight it or emphasize in that kind of composition are very dependent on this lighting scheme. And inside this lighting scheme, the lighting contrast and the lighting between the intensity between key and fill, it's very important to define one kind of atmosphere or the other one. Beside those, let's say, positional keys on the key light, which can be a frontal one, a lateral backlight, or the top, we can also define how the physiognomy or the look of the model is going to be underlined when we change the direction of the light, the key light I'm talking about now, and the quality of it. I mean, either if it's a soft light or a hard light. Now getting to the dynamic range and the contrast ratio, I can explain something like a very technical approach, which is not an easy one, but it's very hard to make it understandable without getting a bit into the technical aspect. The intensity between two stops, let's say. So when we open up or close a stop on the camera, on the lens, that means we double the light which enters through the lens when you open up a stop, or having the light on when we closing the stop. So closing one stop means we do cut the light in half, and open up a stop means doubling the light which getting through the lens by doubling by doing that at a stop. So any stop, T-stop we using in between 1, 4, 2, 2, 8, 4, 5, 6, and so on, we'll do this heavily or doubling the light's intensity which goes through the lens, and then exposing the sensor. The lighting ratio I told you about before, it's also defined by an exponential function of 2 base 2 and the power of 2 in as a base. That's why the lighting ratio, it's named in factors like 1 to 4, 1 to 8, 1 to 16, 1 to 32. And then the contrast ratio is defined after getting further down on this exponential function, which gets to 1 to 128, 1 to 250, 1 to 500, and so on and so forth. That means every doubling of the number will do differences in 1 t-stop from the intensity. Getting back to what I said before, 1 to 4 means 1 to 2 stops differences between key and fill. 1 to 8 means 3 stops differences between fill and key, because 8 means 2 by power of 3. So that 3, the power of 2, which is 2 at the power of 3, it's 8. That's how many t-stops are the differences between key and fill. And that's the value of 1 to 8 key to fill ratio. This lighting intensity, of course, it's as I told you before, is very important in photography and cinema, because when we want to make it a low key or low contrast lighting, we have to get close to that 1 to 4 or 1 to 6, which is 1 to 2, 2.5 stops lighting ratio between key and fill. So this is what you have to have in mind when in low contrast environment, you want to keep the intensities and the ratios between key and fill very low, like 1 to 2 stops or 1 to maximum 3 stops all around. That's why when we go and watch a movie on the cinema screen, we feel this contrast rendered differently than on a TV screen, because even if we look at the movie on the screen, even, I don't know, let's say we watch the same movie on the cinema screen and on the TV screen, the dynamic range of the medium is different, which means between something we've seen in the cinema hall in a theater regarding the contrast ratio and the overall contrast dynamic range of the medium, it looks a bit different from the same film or movie screen on the TV screen, because the TV screen, because of that color space and contrast ratio, which we have it in the television, comparing with the cinema, the movie is going to look different in the TV screen. Of course, the environment we watch the movie in is also very different. When we watch a movie at home in front of the TV, the contrast ratio is very much involved and influenced by the environment we watch the movie on. So in that living room or bedroom we'll watch the TV, we might have the lights which are let's say, interfering with the atmosphere we see the movie. And that means all those extra lights which are involved in this situation will destroy the basic contrast ratio we expected to see on that movie. So that's why even the nowadays resolutions and contrast on the screen for the streaming videos are are much better than the past years. The quality and the contrast of those movies are influenced by the environment we're seeing these films in. So talking about, I don't know, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, and so on and so forth, those streamed movies, videos, are of course influenced by the distance we see the movie from, how big the screen is, and how the environment we used to watch the movie in will affect the overall contrast, the contrast ratio between those lights and the atmosphere of the movie. Also, how we expected to see a movie on the TV screen, comparing with the decision to get into the cinema room in the screening, it also psychological as a psychological approach is a totally different meaning. Why? Because at home we can always stop the movie when the movie is streamed online, or start it from the beginning, or just go fast forward, or just stop frame for some scenes we might thought they're interested, and then skip the important parts of the movie, or ignore the atmosphere which the director and the director of photography have tried to make it in that movie. Anyway, I'm not doing these arguments here between television and cinema because the environment we watch the movie in, it's totally different when we go on theatrical screening, or just watch the same movie on the TV screen or on the laptop, or sometimes even worse on our smartphones. So that environment, it's not only about how the screen is going to be, how the size of the screen will impress us for the story, but also how the environment, which means the sound, if it's a surround sound, if it's a Dolby Atmos, and so on and so forth, how this sound will change the atmosphere, and how we are absorbed by the story which is seen on the screen. In the movie we've seen home, on the TV screen, of course, those kinds of environments are very hard to emulate. So, in my opinion, and it's not only mine, a movie, it's worth it to be seen on the cinema screen, because the atmosphere and the environment itself, it's very different than what we expected to see or make in the home use watching movies. Okay, so Why is that important? The position of the light, the key light. Why is that important for the mood? Because we can make or leave that wait a second to show you. The character can be underlined or just left in the dark just because we choose to make him look like a silhouette or a silhouetted I will show you an example of how one top light will make a difference on a character close-up, which of course is a very famous actresses. Marlene Dietrich, also Greta Garbo or Rita Hayworth had those kind of lighting keys on their faces, but also talking about how the character's position will emphasize or change the feeling of the space and the relation between the light and the character itself. We have two kinds of silhouette. One which is lighted and one which is projected on the background. So the background is brighter than the characters. On the case, the character is also very dark, but it's her or his silhouette. It's lighted by the light effect. Of course, the one of the light effects which can be used in the film or photography is the lens flare, and I've shown you in the video how hard or sometimes how different looks like when we not getting or not paying attention of this lens flare, or how the lens flare is changing the whole feeling of the room or of the character in that lighting scheme. In this video here, I have some moments with wait a second. When this lens flare is explained, I will share this moment here. So it's about how the old feeling of this atmosphere is changed by this lens flare. So the lens flare means the light itself or the source, which is either soft or hard light. It's inside the composition, and this composition contrast, overall contrast, and the feeling of volumes is changed because of this lens flare. I'll get to that right here. So as an example, you have to judge the same lighting scheme with the lens flare or without the lens flare. So sometimes this effect can be very annoying, and it's not only about how we try to show or share the environment we're going to shoot on, sometimes this light effect, it might be too strong for the things we're expecting to show when we use a light effect, and the effect it's into the frame. But as I told you, the feeling of that lens flare can be very different in approaches when this light effect, it's not that long, or it's not that intense in the frame. Okay. Now, getting further on, I will get back to the course and see what else we can discuss here. The exposure time, the color temperature, and all. Okay, there are different topics. And of course, the contrast I told you about, the color space we will talk about further on, and then the composition, there's the next topic, I think. Well, yeah, you can also get back to the course I've wrote you for this module, and see how the relevance of the intensity of densities of the surfaces we see in the frame are relevant for either Ansel Adams zone system, and I've told you about that. And it's there's a zone system in 10 areas, 10 distinct areas, which are defining the densities and the brightness in the scene we have to light it. Those 10 zone systems, Ansel Adams zone systems, are defining the two different areas in this exposure system, which are displayed in two parts, from the middle gray down and from the middle gray up. So middle gray is that density which usually we're taking in as a grant to be in the middle of that dynamic range I already told you about. So if the dynamic range it's exceeding, it's bigger than 10 stops, which the 10 area zone system talks about, that means we're safe to get all those densities and brightnesses in the frame. And I will show you that thing again now, just to have in mind what I'm talking about. So that's the this Ansel Adams zone system, and he's dividing the whole range of brightnesses and darkness in those 10 areas, which in a way are defining the dynamic range of the medium. So we can have this separation of the two areas, the highlights, midtones, and shadows. And the separation between those are, of course, the middle gray, which is in the middle of the interval. And when we talk about 10 areas, that means the biggest dynamic range on Ansel Adams' time, it was 10 stops. So those t-stops, when we look at this graph here, we imagine how any different steps getting higher or lower will define the difference between those two gray patches, a difference of one stop into that difference. Okay, what else? So as a approach, when we try to make, let's say, a mood or an atmosphere shot inside a studio, of course, the approach is totally different than having this kind of goal, or we want to make that kind of moody scene inside a location. The main difference between a studio lighting and location lighting, it's the base of the lighting scheme. The base of the lighting scheme inside an daylight interior location, it's the base which the daylight will make inside that room we shoot it. What does that mean? As I just showed you here, the light effect, which you can see it inside this room, have been dramatically changed from the time we're starting this conference and now. Yeah, why? Because we don't have any light effects on the background, and now the intensity of this desk light, it's much brighter and bigger than what we have as the atmosphere inside the room. Also, being so close as intensities in the room, like the window and this light here, we can better feel the difference of the color in those two lights. So the light which enters to the window, it's a cold light. The light which is here at the desk, it's a normal warm light. But the atmosphere we watch it now here, it's very different from the one we've seen before. If you remember, the room itself and the light effect inside the room was very different 1 hour and something ago. And it was, of course, a nicer atmosphere, and the contrast, of course, was bigger, and the way of seeing that it was based on the how the effects on the window, on the walls there, on the wall behind me, was making the atmosphere credible and nicer than what we were seeing here. Yeah. As an example, I can also change the feeling of it. Only by adding some effect in the background, you can see. And of course, the color of that effect will be, let's say, in a contrast with what this desk light will do on my face, or we can change the color temperature of the background and make it more similar with what we have here. Of course, again, the feeling of the contrast, it's influenced by first the intensity of that light and the direction of it. And of course, we can make it in the middle and making a different mood in the room, just adding this light effect inside it. Yeah, so look at how the room it looks like now and how it looks like right now. Yeah, and of course the color temperature of the light there, it's very important to balance or unbalance the contrast, the color contrast between what we see out here, comparing with the desk light, which is now more or less on the same color temperature, or make it on the opposite, a very cold background, and having this more obvious contrast with the lights we're having here in foreground. So as well, the lights we've seen here, it has an accessory which makes the environment look different. And that's honeycomb. Yeah, this kind of thing, which makes the spread of the light very different. Yeah. Now, as I've seen before, the contrast and the parts of the room which has been lighted by this light now, they are totally different than before, because the light itself and how this intensity and the spread of the light is influenced, of course, with this honeycomb, which is this kind of accessory. We can restrain this light spread, and that's a good thing, because we can adjust how the light is shown inside the room. And I'll make you an example now, just putting back this honeycomb. See the difference. Anyway, this is more or less what we had to discuss in this topic on light and contrast. Of course, the lighting contrast and the ratio between key and the fill is the base of the lighting a scene or a portrait. But then when we get deeper to that approach, we feel how we need to add some more contrast or directions or quality of different lights inside that lighting scheme, just to make it more credible, or more like in a real life that scene to be lighted. So it's not only about the camera and the dynamic range of the camera and how the relations between lenses and sensors and what we already spoke before will do when we photograph or we shoot a scene. It's also very much about lighting that scene and how the characters and the environment are interacting to give that reality feeling, or painterly feeling, or whatever you want to make it out of it, through the lights and lenses and contrast and color contrast and lighting ratio. Okay, so I think Wednesday will talk about a different topic. But also, I think you should load some of the exercises on the platform if you do have the photo cameras to make them. If not, we can discuss to postpone it and see how we can make it later on. Yeah.
This
Okay.
is I wanted to ask, frankly speaking, since I do not have a camera and I wanted like a professional, very professional one. So maybe in this case, something else can be figured out or another solution.
Okay. Yeah. I will think about it. Sometimes you don't need a very specific or very professional camera, but who knows? Yeah, we'll decide later on. Okay. And I'm not sure if you noticed, but the Thursday the class was moved a little earlier from 1 to 3 because it just overlapped with something. I already have it there, unfortunately. Anyway, it's not hope that dramatically. It's instead of 3 to 5, it's from 1 to 3. Like the one on Friday. Anyway, thank you, take care, and see you Wednesday, sorry. First is Wednesday and then Thursday. Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.